Hello, Dog Nation. I'm Brandon Adams. This is Dog Nation's recruiting insider, Jeff Sintel. Welcome into this special edition of Before the Hedges. We're still here at our normal time, Wednesdays at 3 p.m., but it's special today because we look back on what has been a very busy and eventful signing day for the Georgia Bulldogs. Moments ago, Brett Seither, the three-star tight end, he arrives as part of the 2019 class. We'll have more on him in a moment. But the big story is what started the day off, Jeff, when the five-star wide receiver George Pickens, a longtime Auburn commit, flipped away from Auburn to Georgia. We knew something might be up early in the morning when it was announced that Pickens wouldn't be signing with the rest of his classmates later on that afternoon in Hoover. He was going off campus for his announcement. What was not abundantly clear at the beginning, though, would be if the change of venue and the change of time would benefit UGA. After all, he visited Tennessee this past weekend. Had been thought to be in the mix with a couple of other schools as well. But it was good news for Georgia. It is well documented how much I thought Georgia needed an elite receiver and how much, in particular, I wanted Pickens. So I've said probably all that needs to be said on this from my account. Jeff, what's your reaction to seeing what you saw from Pickens earlier today?
A couple things. One, people have already lamented about you. Lamented is the word. That you basically spoke Pickens into existence.
I did. I spoke it into existence, like a Tony Robbins type deal.
And yet, when you get the moment,
I conceived it in my mind.
When you get the moment here in your pulpit, live BA in front of all your fans, you act like Walter Cronkite on the CBS News desk. That was reserved and quiet. There was not a single Brandon Adams fist bump.
Are you talking about now or this morning?
This morning when the news happened. It's been we shared on Twitter. You're like, are you for real?
No.
Is this for real?
Listen,
is this happening?
Listen, come on now. I've still got a job to do. I've still got to educate the people of what's going on. And for a large portion of our Dog Nation daily audience, they listen to the show, they don't see it. So therefore, I got to make sure they are aware of what I know. And that was obviously the Pickens decision. As happy as I am, and I am indeed happy, you still got the job to do. You've got to address the news as it is.
Well, I'm not expecting a Malik Herring backflip or anything from the Christmas commitments video, but like I was expecting maybe some sort of solemn like that.
Well, okay, so here's the thing, and I don't know that I'm capable of quite doing the solemn like this quite as much, but the thing of it is like when you're live on video like that and you're finding something out, you're getting some news. There's also the deal of making sure you understand what's going on. You understand what I'm saying? It's one thing to hear news when we're all just sitting around talking. It's another thing to hear someone say something as you're also in the process of talking to anybody else. So I wanted to make sure that I didn't get drawn off sides by some, not that Connor Riley would give me erroneous information. He would not do that.
Studious Connor Riley. He would never do that.
So I'm not in any way blaming Connor on this. What I'm saying is sometimes I have a tendency to hear what I want to hear, and George Pickens not going to Auburn, there's a tendency that I might have heard UGA when the real answer might have been something else. So you got to be careful in these moments. You still got to address the masses. As I say before, there's something I like more than popping the papers like a real newsman and really delivering the news a la, whomever your favorite anchor is. I'm not even wading into those waters. So, but you know what I mean.
Quickly, we're going to turn the story away from Brandon's mannerisms, which is great. Please drop in what you thought Brandon would have done when he celebrated the arrival of George Pickens in the comment sections below. But
well, I will say we have been celebrating all day around here now. Listen, there's no, we got jobs that we got to be on the video, but when it's not been on video, Fun BA has come out a couple times.
Fun BA. So you speak about Fun BA. I'm going to say maybe Fun JC. That's Fun JC meaning James Coley.
Yeah.
He's going to have a supreme weapon at Georgia. Pickens lines up for the Bulldogs this fall. And I got one for you, Brandon. Not again to put you right on the hot seat here.
By all means, my favorite subject to talk about.
If you would have had your choice, if you were Georgia and Hazelwood and Pickens were both saying yes, there was only room for one five-star receiver.
You know I'm going to be political about this. I'm very happy with the receiver that Georgia's gotten. I'm very happy with the receiver that Georgia's gotten. Let me do a few things on this, and I want to get to obviously the hot topic at hand in a moment. I don't think you can talk about this subject without addressing that. We'll get to that in a moment. You got a really interesting piece at DogNation.com. One of the quotes that you cite comes from the TV station in Birmingham, WRBC, who was on hand with Pickens when he made his announcement of Georgia a little earlier today. Let me show you this quote because I thought this was really telling. Pickens about Auburn, and Georgia says they both had good coaches, great everything. They both were actually the same in my mind. It's just what separated them was I love this, the winning factor. They both had great quarterbacks, and then I'm not quite sure who the great quarterback at Auburn is, but nonetheless, they both had great quarterbacks. And in the past, that Kirby was with Saban, so that kind of brought out a lot of me. That's George Pickens of the TV station WRBC out of Birmingham. That phrase jumps out at you, Jeff, winning factor. Kirby Smart, when he was on ESPNU a little earlier today, also cited the fact that Pickens was present on an unofficial visit on the day that Auburn played Georgia. So Pickens in Sanford Stadium got to see with his own eyes how close Georgia is to getting over the hump and likely how far away Auburn is from those same goals. And that kind of stuff, based on what Kirby said earlier, based on what Pickens says right there in the quote that I just read, that seems to be a telling part of this recruitment, does it not?
It's interesting. One of the other comments he said, I always knew if I didn't go to Auburn, I was going to go to Georgia. And that's why he kind of constantly had Georgia way up there with his decision. I kind of wonder now about the intersecting timelines there with Hazelwood and Pickens. There was a time, Hazelwood was committed to Georgia until October the 2nd. So obviously Pickens was already chiefly interested in Georgia at that time. Probably those two guys are really good friends. They interviewed each other sometimes after games. One was going to Auburn, one was going to Georgia. Now one's going to Oklahoma, one's going to Georgia. And I think that was maybe, he didn't want to slide into that spot when that guy was already there. But, I mean, now James Coley's happy. Jake Fromm's going to be happy as long as George Pickens lines up and makes his way to Georgia, matriculates to Georgia this fall.
And I'll deal with that part of this in a moment. Let me bring up something else that Kirby Smart said when he discussed this on ESPNU. Kirby cited the official visit that Pickens took a couple of weeks ago as part of the process here and part of what attracted Pickens to UGA. And it's important to note, based on the quote that you just mentioned about the fact that Pickens was kind of always considering Georgia, maybe not in first place, but always no worse than second place of the silver medal for his services. That was always a big part of this. And Kirby said when they hosted Pickens for that official visit a couple of weeks ago, there weren't a lot of other recruits on campus. So this was one of those moments, and when you take care of most of your business of the 2019 class in December, you know what you can do? You can have a specialized weekend. You can throw a Hail Mary towards one committed player and try to flip him because you don't have to worry about anything else. Georgia, at most, could have signed 3 players today. That means they've already done most of their work. Auburn is scrambling, trying to sign as many as 8 today. Those are 2 very different scenarios approaching the traditional old-school February National Signing Day. Georgia could pay Pickens a lot more individual attention, and I'm going to say, based on Kirby Smart's own words, the late individual attention that Georgia was able to pay to Pickens, that would have really seemed to have helped out here.
Few things. Number one, you got to love the old school video game kind of logos and graphics on this highlight film. He calls himself the GOAT. We talked about on the forum a little bit today about big boy receivers and big boy football. George Pickens caught 60-plus balls, 1,400 yards, 16 touchdowns in big boy football. And it was basically, in a nutshell, something sort of like this. Defensive coordinator for the opposition goes, fellas, got to stop that Pickens dude. Whatever we do, we have to stop that Pickens dude. Nobody's getting any post-game Chick-fil-A unless we stop that Pickens dude. Nobody's getting anything from the Kroger Deli unless we stop that Pickens dude. And you know what? Nobody stopped that Pickens dude. Here's a comparison. I think it's still a fair comparison. What Georgia hoped Matt Landers and Tommy Bush would turn out to be is what George Pickens already is for the class of 2019.
So in our Facebook comment section, Josh Moynihan brings this up. It's a fair part of this conversation. As I've said already this morning, you can't pretend this doesn't exist. Josh asks you, what is the latest on Pickens' pursuit of being qualified? We've heard about the alleged academic issues facing Pickens. Jeff, I'm going to repeat what I've said now a number of times. Obviously, we know that's out there. That's a part of this conversation, even if someone like me doesn't know all the official particulars involved. But I'm going to assume that Kirby knows far more about this than I do. And I'm not trying to turn this into some sort of corner, you got to trust the coaches. That's not my job to carry the water for them in that regard. But Kirby treats his scholarships very preciously. He's not going to just throw one out there in the hopes that it might stick to the wall in the case of Pickens. My assumption is by offering the scholarship and accepting the signature the way that Georgia did with Pickens today, their assumption is he's going to be playing football for Georgia this upcoming fall.
Well, it's at least close enough where that gamble doesn't feel like a gamble for them at all. Like, let's look in the past. Georgia's tried this with Nadab Joseph. They signed him in 2018. He was also a big signing day flip from the state of Alabama, at least the clutches of a program in the state of Alabama. And Nadab Joseph did not end up at the University of Georgia. So what you're looking at there is, maybe calculated a little bit, but the one thing that maybe not a lot of people are thinking about now is he's a wide receiver. So wide receivers are some of the easiest players to plug and play and play right away. So if this looks like a Maymester, which would be the ideal, or a June or a July issue, maybe a revisit of Notori Johnson's qualification timeline for Georgia. If it stretches into June and July, I can kind of always wonder how this is going to go. You're going to be talking about George Pickens.
Oh, yeah.
Has he reported yet? When is he enrolled? You want to see him in that video when they tweeted out where they're at the dorm and everybody's moving in?
Oh, listen. What's that song they always play at graduations? The da-da-na-na.
Yeah.
We'll be playing that thing on a loop.
So, another thing. And what was the over-under? Because I think you asked me about it on our when I joined you on your 10 a.m. show today, when Georgia had 8 less stars on the board than it does now. How long, honestly, my man, when Georgia signed George Pickens, did you start thinking about Robbie Ashford?
No, the 2020 quarterback, that was like within the first 5 minutes. Now, you got to realize my excitement about Pickens lasted beyond that, but there are a lot of reasons to like Pickens beyond just what he brings to the table. One day, I think he's going to make Alabama and Auburn regret this recruitment as much as they regret the one with Justin Ross, who just, spurned Auburn last year and then beat up Alabama in the national championship game. I think the state of Alabama losing George Pickens could one day be just as harmful, but in addition to who Pickens is as a player, the connection he has, undeniable high school teammates with the 2020 quarterback Robbie Ashford, who, based on what I've seen so far, I like as much as any 2020 quarterback I've seen up to this point. I take it as all good news right now.
This is almost,
and we're not far away, just a few weeks away from Ashford's decision.
This is almost 2 for 1 Dog Nation right here, because not only are we talking about George Pickens and everybody can see some of those 16 touchdowns they saw right there, but you also get to see Robbie Ashford wing him all those touchdowns as well. So I'm sure the thought is probably crossing everybody's mind right now. What if that is the future of some of the impact of Georgia's passing game is 2020, 2021, 2022? You have Robbie Ashford.
I like it.
Throwing to George Pickens.
I like it a lot. We'll talk more about this with you in our comment section throughout the program today. RJ Raines also brings up the name Nick Cross. There's some news involving Cross. We'll get to that later on in our program, and we'll do our part, probably mostly Jeff, me just spouting off my opinions about whether the news involving Cross is potentially good, bad, or neutral news for UGA. With that said, here on Before the Hedges presented by Kroger, let me also remind you that Kroger's the place to go as we head towards this Valentine's season. You got cards, you got the flowers, you got everything you need right there. They're going to take good care of you even up to the last minute. Now, I'm not encouraging you to be a last-minute shopper, but if you are, Kroger will still be there for you. So check out your Atlanta area Kroger as we head towards the Valentine's holiday.
Was Kirby Smart in Georgia a last-minute shopper?
I think they were.
Actually,
they weren't. That's what the Auburn fans want to have you believe. That they want to have you believe that Kirby swooped in here in the last minute. But I just cited 2 very high-profile visits Pickens took to UGA recently, and there have been others. In-home visit here as well, according to Kirby's own words, played an instrumental role in this. So I get what you're saying, the funny tie-in to Kroger, but a lot of the Auburn people are going to have you believe this is somehow some sort of miracle by Georgia swooping in and taking a player that was theirs all along. I got news for the rando Auburn fan that may be watching right now. Pickens had a wandering eye for a little bit here. That marriage maybe not have been as happy as some of y'all thought it was.
So I'm going to take you guys back to January the 1st. There was a bunch of reporters around George Pickens. He comes into the room at the Under Armour Media Day, and he's got LSU bands on, he's got Georgia bands on, he's got Auburn bands on. He talks about Ohio State, he talks about Georgia consistently, along with LSU, putting the full court press there for him for his recruitment. He talked about how Georgia wins. He likes how Georgia wins, but he also spoke about how he knew the quarterback situation would get figured out. he also knew that the future quarterback position would get figured out. And he also, when he talked about Georgia, he talked about the following. He talked about, I know I'm going to go there to develop his football, but he thinks Cortez Hankton can also develop him off the field as well. And it's more about developing him as a man. Because remember, he did make some very pointed comments about Justin Fields and how if he went there, it was almost going to be like the all-star juggernaut team getting together from Cam Newton's 7-on-7 Barnstormers. Now that's not going to happen. But at the same time, like he said today, he said he's going to have a good quarterback there to work with at Georgia. And this is a big get for the Bulldogs. And I want to say this, lots of people like to say, oh, I'm this guy, I'm smart, I knew this, we told you so. There's a lot of people that can always double down with this thing about, oh, I see embers, or oh, watch this. This is a surprise to most of the recruiting industry. Not only the fact that he flips, you got to remember, he was the Nolan Smith of the Auburn class. He was the first commitment for the 2019 class for Gus Malzahn, back during hot seat Gus Malzahn, nonetheless. He withstood all that and waited and waited and waited and remained a part of this class until the very end. And he told the reporters assembled there in Birmingham today that he said he thought it was probably the hardest day of his life.
Some would say that George Pickens is still a lot like Nolan Smith, given the thing that Nolan Smith is most famous for. Pickens did that himself today as he sacked Auburn. So I think that some would say that there's still a pretty strong connection between what George Pickens is and what Nolan Smith is. That comparison certainly seems to work. We'll talk more about George Pickens in our comment section with you throughout the program here on Before the Hedges, including a lot more comments later on. Let me deal, though, with some other news as Georgia gets another commit today, this time from three-star tight end Brett Seither. Now, Seither was a name that someone like me was certainly called upon to play catch-up on over the course of the last few weeks. This was not someone that was admittedly on my radar in December, but after Isaac Nada makes his decision to move on the NFL, after Luke Ford makes the decision to transfer back to his home state to play for Lovie Smith in Illinois, all of a sudden Georgia needed a tight end and it went head-to-head with Alabama for Seither and ultimately wins this recruiting battle. Certainly, it seems, you throw some bouquets in the direction of Todd Hartley, the brand new tight ends coach, who's obviously a well-regarded recruiter, otherwise he wouldn't be at UGA. Beyond that, though, what would you say about the addition of Seither today?
Well, I think it's definitely a win for Hartley because that was a marked man for Georgia. And really, if you asked Seither maybe a month ago, yeah, obviously January the 1st, probably thought he was going to go to TCU. He was a guy that saw a few things. I think his recruiting escalated because of the early signing period, and he made himself into one of the top targets left at tight end during the late signing period. We're going to call it the left behind signing period a little bit after that book series for February the 6th. But what was left was a guy like Hartley went after a guy like Seither, who didn't play football at all his junior year, only had like 12 catches. But then he exploded as a senior, 600 yards, 45 catches, 15 yards per catch, 6 touchdowns. You see all the good stuff there. Right there for Seither. And then that film went out. All of a sudden he went from a guy that was maybe Michigan State, Indiana, maybe even Central Florida, not quite that, all that in the upper echelons of college football. And then all of a sudden it's Alabama, Penn State, Georgia, late because schools needed tight ends. Georgia definitely needed tight ends. And they get a guy like Seither, to me, he just looks like one of those big body wide receivers more than anything else. I think the first clip on his film is very demonstrative about what he can do. He breaks so many tackles. You see a lot of physical play there for him. And now Georgia has a second tight end in the room that's coming in the 2019 class. Will Ryland Goody be ready? When will Brett Seither report? Probably late May, early June. And then you have your stalwarts, John Fitzpatrick and Charlie Warner. And now Georgia has 4 tight ends for new tight ends coach Todd Hartley to coach.
Chris Tatum in our Facebook comment section is dropping in some news. Connor, can we confirm that some news on a linebacker that may have chosen a school other than Alabama? That may be relevant for reasons that some of you are already aware of. We'll confirm that and make that announcement if we can indeed get that. Also, let you hear on the subject, that is true. So, I don't know how you say his name, Toto, the linebacker that was going to choose between Alabama, Tennessee, and Washington. He has chosen, apparently, Tennessee, as our commenter was good enough to put in our comment section. So, Jeff, I don't know if this matters to you. I mostly pay attention to the 24/7 Sports Composite, which combines all the recruiting rankings. Yeah. But I believe, based on some of the internet chatter I've seen today, there's a chance that Georgia may go #1 in the Rivals ranking of the 2019 class now.
Well, I think Georgia's already #1 in the Rivals ranking.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's what I said.
But I mean, Rivals is one part of the industry. I have some.
Well, hold on now. I'm not telling you it's the end-all be-all. I'm saying that to be #1 anywhere is kind of a nice thing.
Is that like the Lipids-Albert poll for the national championship?
Yeah, you misunderstood what I said. I said I mostly care about the 24/7 sports composite, but if you can be #1 somewhere, I'm not going to turn it down.
You're not going to turn it down? I mean, but also, let's not talk out of both sides of our mouth. There's some great guys that do evaluation at Rivals, but there's also, if you look at some of their ratings, they're not. I mean, they've got Godey as a 3-star. They've got players like McIntosh as a 3-star.
No, as long as it equals #1.
I don't know how in the world Georgia gets the #1 with all those kind of off-target or at least unique ratings for some of those guys. But apparently Alabama's guys, some of those guys are 3-stars as well. I mean, you've already won the mythical recruiting championship, Brandon. Do you want back-to-backs from somebody?
Listen, to quote the great Mr. Burns from The Simpsons, everything I've got, I'd trade it all for just a little more, and that's kind of where I am when it comes to when it comes to this kind of stuff. That's kind of where I am. But speaking of that, that's news to get. Hold on. Let me do one more thing on Brett Seither before we get there.
Okay.
Hold on. So Jeff gave you a good dissertation on Seither, but a little earlier today we also had a chance to talk to the great former Georgia wide receiver Terrence Edwards.
He likes him a lot.
He really does. Now I want y'all to hear this and see this. For a guy that we sort of think of as, oh, he's coming to Georgia to fill a need. You know, if it wasn't for the need at tight end, there might not be a Brett Seither. That is not what Terrence Edwards sees when he looks at Brett Seither. This was interesting from earlier. Take a look.
I just watched this film recently once we made an offering and other schools are offering, and I can tell you this, he's different than any other tight end that we have on our roster right now. He's 6'5", 235 pounds, but he moves like a small wide receiver, and that's something that in today's game that we're going to, like a Melvin Ingram and from Ole Miss that plays with the Giants. You got these tight ends now. Irv Smith from Alabama last year was one of those guys that run routes like a receiver and move like a receiver. And this guy here is definitely one of those guys I think it can impact Georgia.
I have such a serious listening face when I do that. I got to work on my listening face, be a little bit more jovial with my listening face. But nonetheless, you hear from Edwards a real strong endorsement of Seither as the kind of guy that could use his athleticism and maybe one day resemble some guys who've done some big things in the NFL. That's a pretty interesting statement to come from Edwards, who knows this position as a personal coach. I mean, he knows all about guys that go out and catch footballs, and Edwards seems to really like Brett Seither, and that's unsolicited. That's something that he offered up on his own. That's not something I certainly asked him to say. He jumped in wanting to make sure he got that in. Told me before the show started, listen, I want you to know something. I've seen Brett Seither and I really like him.
So I talked to Terrence on the down low or back and forth from time to time, and I guess I've been talking to him about Seither for maybe about 4 or 6 weeks now, something like that. And he one of the things he even tweeted it out when he saw Seither's film is he said, I watch his film and I like what I saw. He moved very well and he has very good ball skills. He's also a very good run after the catch guy. So hold on a second, Brandon. We have a tight end who's a very good run after the catch guy. Who was the tight end that just left Georgia?
That would be Isaac Naughty.
Isaac Naughty, you got to call him a very good run after catch guy. And the other thing to think about there was Seither. I mean, he's kind of got a little bit more juice than your average, your average 3-star, 4-star tight end.
What does juice mean in this case?
Juice means a little wiggle, a little foot speed, and he's going to bring you some wow on his highlight film.
I would agree with that. If juice is commensurate with wow, I would agree. He does bring that.
It is commensurate. Also, one more thing. You don't work on your listening face while we're having our Before the Hedges shows?
No, see, I've got this habit when I do my listening face. I have a tendency to be really serious because I think of it because I am actually hopefully really listening to what the person's having to say. But if you ever watch, I'm so jealous of, y'all know who Skip Bayless is. I feel like Skip Bayless has got a great listening face. Like when whoever the other hot take guy on that other side of the table is doing the debating, Skip's like a lot of I need to work on a better listening face.
Goals for 2019? I would trade everything I've got for just a little bit more. That's like I would trade all the 5 stars we got for just a little bit more. And by the way, Georgia ends up with 5 stars right now in the class of 2019. That's another impressive haul. When you consider Dominic Blaylock lost one of his 5s, and then you saw a guy like John Emer Jr. and Jaden Hazelwood drift away. So when you can lose 3 5 stars and still end up with 5, That's a very impressive accomplishment. But I want to know this, young Brandon Adams.
Please.
Is it more impressive to you, this whole Pickens narrative, is the big thing at the end of the day? Remember how you said you wanted your chief, your chief hope, the fire in your belly for the Clay Webb decision was to pull him out of Alabama and wrestle him away from the Crimson Tide? Not only have you done that, but you see the trickeration that happened. Clay Webb was the #1 player in Alabama, but when he signed and done to Georgia, you can't market that anymore. So George Pickens becomes the #1 player in Alabama. Oh, and lo and behold, Georgia just takes him out of this Yellowhammer state as well. Not one, but 2 5-stars from the state of Alabama that the Tide and the Tigers both desperately wanted. My friend, I want to know, where does that rank on Mount Olympus for you with Kirby Smart and his recruiting achievements right now?
Now that was a good listening face. I have no idea what you're saying, but I feel like I really pulled the listening face off that time. I feel like I nailed that. Going into the state of Alabama, I think that's what you're asking about, and getting the top two guys from that state, it is. I mean, as I've said before, Clay Webb represents more of a luxury for Georgia than an outright need, and I think that Pickens is more than a luxury. I think that Pickens is just he's as vital to Georgia as oxygen, I believe. But the symbolism of going into that state and getting those 2 top guys, I just think is massive, and I think it matters. Auburn fans are going to be whining and complaining. We're already seeing this. Alabama fans are going to be trying to play the disregard game. I'm going to hear some of this a little bit later on. I'm going to go on the Feinbaum show. I'm going to talk about this very subject. They've asked to discuss this today. So I know the Alabama fans are going to have their daggers out like they always do. But deep down, they know that Kirby Smart is building something from a recruiting standpoint at Georgia that threatens the dynasty they have. To the Crimson Tide's credit, they've won the last 2 head-to-head meetings. You can't take that away from them. But if you gave me the choice between 2 narrow on-field wins and the momentum that Kirby has built up going now, put aside the 2016 class, which may have been the best recruiting class for any coach yet to coach his first game. He may have made history in 2016 as much as any class that he's brought in. Just look at 17, 18, and now 19. These top 3 300-point level classes, for those of you who pay attention to the overall ratings of 24/7 Sports, just look at these 3 classes alone. That to me dictates what the future of college football is going to look like, far more than some what narrow wins have been in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium the last couple of years.
I was working on my face there too, listening to you. I did notice that you dropped both Paul Feinbaum and Skip Bayless within a 7-minute increment of your show here today, our show here today. So that's very impressive there, my friend. And is this a good signing day for you now?
I'm very happy. I'm very happy. Listen, I mean, we'll get to Elam in a moment. He did what he did, and I guess we'll wish him well. But listen, I feel like the hay's in the barn. I do.
Want to tell you, the fine folks at 24/7 Sports with their great database and their rankings, the score right now is 317.5 to 308.9.
And 308 is a stupid score. I mean, that's incredibly high.
As we've written about on the pages of DogNation.com over the last couple of days, it's the 2nd best class in Georgia history.
All right, so Blind Squirrel Sports asked about the fact that Georgia adding a high school senior tight end, a high school senior wide receiver. How does that impact Georgia with some of the graduate transfers it could have been pursuing at those same positions? We'll do more on that later on the program. But I want to pay off also on something that another viewer had asked about us a little bit earlier when it comes to Nick Cross, the 4-star defensive back. So we'll do that. Let me remind you, it's Before the Hedges presented by Kroger. That is Dog Nation's recruiting insider Jeff Sintel. My name is Brandon Adams. Thanks so much for being here with us. And don't forget to check out the Kroger near you in the Atlanta area as we get ready for Valentine's coming up in a couple of days. Don't get left out in the cold on this. Get there, get what you need, or if you're just getting ready to relax this weekend, enjoy some of this great weather, anything on the grill, just cooking out, having a good time. It's all for you right there at your local Atlanta Kroger. All right, here was the somewhat surprising piece of news that happened a little earlier today, and I don't yet know if this benefits Georgia. It may not have any impact on UGA whatsoever, but I couldn't help but notice Steve Wiltfong from 24/7 Sports tweeting out a little earlier that what was supposed to be a 2:15 p.m. announcement for the 4-star defensive back Nick Cross, now not going to happen. Wiltfong reporting that he's not expected to sign today. Obviously a Florida State commit who just took an official visit to Penn State and an unofficial visit to Georgia within the last week as well. I guess a few questions here. Does Georgia have room for Nick Cross? Does Georgia still have the ear of Nick Cross with him postponing this? what do you make of the fact that Cross remains on the board post-signing day?
So in your heart of hearts, are you hoping, because, I don't know, you're the fellow that said, I trade everything I've got for just a little bit more? Are you thinking that the Kaiir Elam decision opens up a why not for Nick Cross?
I don't know. I mean, I'm of the belief that Kirby and the staff are such good recruiters that if a player is available, that's never good news for the school opposite Georgia in the recruitment. So by extending this beyond signing day, if Georgia chooses to be involved, then certainly I think they can become a more dangerous threat. Much the same way that the limited number of recruiting work that Georgia needed to do for its 2019 class probably helped with George Pickens. The same thing can be true for Nick Cross remaining on the board. I just don't know what's in Cross's heart right now. After the Penn State visit, after what I thought was likely to be, just stick with the Florida State thing, that may be, as some of our listeners and viewers have said lately, just such a disaster that he's forced to go somewhere else. But I honestly don't know that Georgia would stand to benefit from that.
Well, two things. One, it would not surprise me anything that Nick Cross does over the last month of his recruitment. I'm just going to say that right now. Would not surprise me anything he does. Second thing, Maryland emerging as a contender is probably not a good thing for Georgia.
Yeah, Terrence mentioned that a little earlier. Boy, you got to give Mike Locksley some credit. He's coming in and doing some stuff.
Because, I mean, whatever benefits Georgia had in this race, maybe they were more successful, maybe higher pedigree of DB coaching, playing in a big conference, playing with a lot of dogs per se. For him to come back to a Maryland program and the home fires burning there a little bit, tends to think that there's a Penn State connection for a reason, and now there's a Maryland connection for a reason. What do those two schools have in common besides having to wear some Lululemon jogging pants right now around everywhere? They're Northeastern schools. Mm-hmm. They're up there closer to home, closer to mom's home cooking or whatever you want to say. I mean, if we would call Brett Seither and gravy on top of the 2019 recruiting class, and then we would call, I guess, the chef coming back afterward to Kirby Smart and saying, would you like to try some Wagyu beef steak? And that's the form of the five-star wide receiver, George Pickens. Nick Cross, great player. I think Georgia would love to have him. I don't know if Nick Cross knows what he wants right now.
I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I like Cross. I did want Elam a lot more, though. I mean, I won't pretend otherwise. I mean, I wouldn't turn Nick Cross down, I don't think. But in terms of what my preference as a fan was, my preference was Elam all along.
Because that was the pure cornerback, I guess?
That's what I think Georgia needs. I mean, I really like Georgia's situation at safety. I am not selling any of my Richard LeCounte stock. I'm still holding on to every bit of Richard LeCounte stock that I have. I could see a much improved version of LeCounte in his third year in the program this year. I am really excited about what Lewis Seen brings to the table. I think Otis Reese is just absolutely about to make himself a good bit of money here. And J.R. Reed obviously returning as one of the big gets for Georgia, because Reed is, in addition to being a really good player, terrific leader. Georgia needs the corner more than the safety, I believe.
Well, and then also I need to hear about. It sounds like you're buying some stock on Otis Reese. You're buying some stock on Lewis Seen. I'm
high on these Georgia safeties.
What about Devon Wilson? Might need to buy some stock on that.
I think of him more as a third cornerback. You may tell me from a position standpoint, it's a little different conversation with him, but I think of Wilson right now. Georgia uses a couple different kinds of stars. I think of him as that third cornerback version of the star. That's kind of how I think about Wilson right now, who, by the way, y'all go check these out before he deletes them. Kind of went at Anthony Schwartz, the Auburn wide receiver, on Twitter today. Don't think I didn't notice that, too. Listen, we're having fun on a signing day. I said this on Dog Nation earlier this morning. In addition to being happy that Georgia's gotten a big-name player, I'm just happy that February signing day still means something. I'm an old-school guy. I don't want to see this day erased from the calendar. I like February signing day, and you know what? We're having a good time here today.
Listen, the guy that's about to go on Feinbaum wants it to turn into Anchorman with the Spanish news team and Channel 7 and Channel 11, like a backstreet brawl on Twitter between rival Twitter fans.
Yeah, listen. The SEC is the way it's supposed to be when all these fan bases and these players of these various teams are at each other's throats. That's how we're all comfortable, and things are kind of back to normal after this very, very eventful day here today.
So 2016, some really quick recapping here. You have the flip of Tyler Simmons. Mm-hmm. You have the greatness of McCole Hardman's decision. You have Mikhail Carter. You have that kind of good vibes, the flipping of David Marshall away from Auburn. 2017, which was the last non-early signing period signing day. You see, all those guys come into the fold. Andrew Thomas, yada yada yada, players like that.
Yeah.
2018. I mean, gosh, everybody's going to remember 2018. We're talking about the regulation, old school signing day, and not the early signing period, because the 2018 signing class went bonkers on the early signing period. But then you have Tyson Campbell on the late period. You have on the late period, you also have Otis Reese. On the late period, you also have a ton of guys coming in for Georgia. Quay Walker's hat, is it still spinning around the SEC?
But remember though, Kirby told us last year that he knows there's another coach on the other side of that flip. Kirby doesn't like flipping. People like you get into the flipping. Kirby says he doesn't like that. He thinks it teaches kids the wrong stuff. That's what he said last year.
This is Brandon talking about out of both sides of his mouth right now. You want all that. So, but is this the second best February signing day of Kirby Smart's time?
Without a doubt. Second best class Georgia's ever had. And by the way, last year.
But only two guys? Only two guys, and it's nothing.
No. Well, I mean, I'm just saying how it factors into the overall day. I mean, 2017, as of last year, was the second best Georgia class. It's the third best Georgia class of all time now. If you keep moving the second best class down every year, you're going to be in business. Let's talk about Kaiir Elam for a moment, though. Before the Hedges presented by Kroger, I don't want to spend a ton of time on this, but it is worth pointing out for those of you that may have missed it on the Dog Nation video channels earlier. Elam had a little fun at Georgia's expense. Let me show you this here as he made his announcement before he puts on the Florida hat, and we'll show you the video. Before he puts on the Florida hat, he's putting on the Georgia hat first. Watch him reach down in here. You're going to see this, get a look pretty quickly. He doesn't have the guts to go all the way through with it, but he does pull the Georgia hat first, then gives you the Florida hat, then gives you the Gator chomp. I would be the biggest hypocrite in the world if I criticized him for this, because nobody enjoyed the Quay Walker hat toss more than I did, and Elam, by comparison, is a 2 on a scale of 100 based on what Walker did last year. But honesty compels me to admit there was a little bit of a Georgia troll job there.
Hold on, you don't believe in the kindness and the greatness of people and the pure, genuine honesty? Maybe he just had two hats. He wasn't sure, and the Georgia one was on top.
I felt like there's a little something to that. And there had been some people in our comment section earlier this morning to say he was walking around with the Georgia gear last night. We've seen a lot of this as of late. It feels like the trolling before the announcement is starting to become a lot more prevalent than it once was. And I guess Elam did some of that. Listen, I'm not mad at him. He sees an opportunity to play right away at Florida. I would have liked to have had him. He chose Florida over Georgia. This is a win for the Gators. That's really all I got to say.
Hold on. So you're telling me
would have taken him? He chose Florida. He may regret it.
This may be breaking Brandon news. Are you telling me that was theatrical? That it was a staged event in front of a live ESPN audience at the request of probably Dan Mullen?
Yeah, I know he'd be the first one to ever do something like that, but that is going to be my assumption here. There may have been a little extra theatrics involved in some of that.
I just try to see the good in people, Brandon. I just think he had two hats. He was torn. He had two hats in the bag. Of course he did that.
What did Georgia lose by not getting him? Just give me a couple seconds on that, if you don't mind.
He's a great corner. I think he's highly rated for a reason. He has NFL bloodlines. I think he's more of a technician at cornerback than the pure athlete that's going to blow up the schematics and metrics of a combine testing. Very good at what he does. One of the stats I dropped into the commitment story for Kaiir Elam to the Gators. Very few commitment stories I've had to write with a Gators type of thing on.
You're right. They haven't won head-to-head with Georgia in a while.
But I will say that one of the glaring stats is he had no targets. He had 0 catches given up. He gave up 0 catches.
That's certainly impressive. You've told us this a million times that if it did not go well for Georgia, the absence of Mel Tucker may have been the reason why. Is that kind of the autopsy on this in your mind right now?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think he was probably going to go to Georgia when he talked today about all those pros and cons, being so many pros for Florida, especially in the evolution of the defensive back coach position there at Florida. I was very interested in that one because I knew Georgia had some deep-rooted attachment to Kaiir Elam. And, hey, give the Gators credit, man. They still don't have a 5-star yet, though.
Yeah, listen, you can't win them all. They won this one.
One other point, I know you're not going to take too much delight in this point, but as we pointed out on the Dog Nation forum earlier today, Florida gets 2 guys today. Chris Bogle.
Yeah, flip from Alabama. That's a pretty nice win.
And they also get, I think maybe Bogle is a casualty of finding room for Sopsher later in the day.
Oh, is that right?
But the other.
He just committed like 2 days ago.
The other thing to think about there with Florida is they pick up 2 guys, and they only have 5 of the top 30 now in the state of Florida as well. And you look at that, Georgia took 4 out of the top 30 in the state of Florida as well. So everybody's bemoaning the lack of in-state signees for the Bulldogs in this great state of Georgia. But Florida got 2 today, and they still only got 4 or 5 within their home stomping grounds in the state of Florida.
Before we do our weekly six-pack, and we're still going to do that today, have some fun with some trivia. Jeff's always great at that. Let me address something that a few people in our comment section have already brought up, which is the likelihood that Georgia could still go after a graduate transfer, just some sort of transfer in the portal now. And I asked this earlier, and the honest truth is I don't know. Could Georgia have signed 3 today if it wanted to? I'm assuming it could have. Otherwise, it wouldn't have done the work that it did. Does that mean that it can still sign a graduate transfer? My understanding is that it'll count against 2020. There's the debate then of, well, is the 2020 scholarship worth more than what a graduate transfer brings in right now? It's also ironic that the 2 guys that Georgia signed today are at positions where graduate transfers seemingly have been considered. There's been plenty of reporting that Lawrence Kaiir, the Miami wide receiver, visited Georgia, and Mike Griffiths had reporting on Eli Wolf, the Tennessee tight end. What do you make of the scenario with all of that right now?
I think grad transfers are still in play. I think Georgia. The thing you got to think about with Seither and Godey is you still got 2 tight ends that you're going to have to train how to play in college football. And remember, Georgia had 2 pretty good tight ends last season, Luke Ford and John Fitzpatrick. Fitzpatrick redshirted. Luke Ford played very sparingly, but he played in a lot of games, but he was always a special teams guy or a late guy coming in. So you would have to think, even with amending Ryland Godey, that's 2 guys that are going to have to get up to speed. And now, like we said before, they can slap a number 42 jersey on a tackle and they can roll with it. But I think having only 2 guys, half your tight end room being true freshmen who have never played it down in college football, I still think that's where a guy like Eli Wolf would be valuable.
So my Dog Nation daily endorsement, to the extent that's worth anything, is I like the idea of the 3rd offensive tackle on the field, especially early in the season. And I want to see these guys like John Fitzpatrick get their chance. If Georgia's looking for its 2nd tight end to be a blocking guy, I'd really like to see Fitzpatrick, who was a pretty good-looking, although under-heralded signee from the 2018 class. I want to see a guy like Fitzpatrick get his chance.
Fitzpatrick is going to be a guy that's going to flash a lot more in the passing game as well. Big guy, great hands, going to be tenacious, going to be physical, going to know his playbook inside and out. That's just something to think about there. And, you got to think about Kaiir, Pickens. Maybe this might be the most telling endorsement I will say about George Pickens, but if George Pickens and Lawrence Kaiir are in the same room in Athens, first of all, it's going to be scary things. But the second of all is, I know how you like to see people that have put up stats.
I do.
George Pickens has a very high upside, sir.
Yeah, I think that Pickens is the better player over Kaiir, but that doesn't mean I wouldn't still want Kaiir. I may regret saying this, but if you're giving me the chance to kind of move the chess pieces around the way that I want to, if I had my choice of Lawrence Kaiir or Eli Wolf, I believe I'm taking Kaiir over Wolf. Am I wrong, given Georgia's position of needed tight end? I believe I'd take the extra wide receiver.
Well, I think you'd probably, if the options there, would you take both and risk any sort of scholarship implications down the road?
I mean, it seems the strategy is to always punt a year down the road with a really tough roster decision. So yeah, why not? I guess.
Teams being built to win now. You got to think Georgia's window with all these 2018, 2019, potentially third-year juniors.
You're right about that.
Got to win now.
Wolf and Kaiir, were they to come in, are almost like trade deadline pro sports acquisitions. You're bringing them in because trying to win a national championship in 2019, you've got it in front of you. You do everything you can to do that right there, especially when you don't really know what Fromm's status is going to be in 2021, or I should say in 2020. I assume he'll be at Georgia for all 4 years, but listen, he could really light himself on fire, light the world on fire in his 3rd year and go into the NFL. So maximizing the roster opportunity with Fromm still in the roster makes some sense.
I think that's some maybe undiscovered country to explore now across your shows and platforms for 2019. Knowing what J.R. Reed brings to the table, I think Andrew Thomas is a top 10 tackle. Isaiah Wilson might go as well. DeAndre Swift is going to put up the numbers to bolt as well. I think Georgia's best chance to win a national title, the biggest opening of the window, not saying it's not going to happen later on, but the window is going to be, I think, at its peak opportunity for the 2019 season.
All right, coming up in just a moment, we'll have our $50 Kroger How About Them Groceries gift card. We'll do it as part of our Hurry Up. We try to take as many questions and comments as we can over the course of a 5-minute period. Before that, though, on what has been a fun Wednesday here around Dog Nation, let's make it even more fun as Jeff shares his weekly six-pack with trivia questions, our chance to show what we know. Let's take a look at that right now.
So first of all, one more thing about those great Kroger reads you were doing right there.
Yep.
Simple message: don't lose your 5-star, guys. Go to Kroger early for Valentine's Day.
Well said. Well said.
Somebody in the great state of Alabama knows what it's like right now to lose a 5-star.
Well said. Well said.
Let's hit the 6-pack. 6-pack. The National Signing Day edition. 6-pack. First on the board. What do you think our flavor of the day is, Brandon?
I'm going to say it's February signing days, I'm assuming.
February signing days. It's signing day. I almost thought about.
Up until last year, they were all February signing days, but.
I almost thought about for this weekend, I'm going to punt on that one, kind of like Georgia's scholarship limbo.
Okay.
The ones that got away. We're going to do the ones that got away later
such
on.
Negativity.
No, it's not. No, it's
such
not.
Negativity.
These are happy endings.
All
First question. It is not the one that got away. Buzzer's intact. I'm ready to say. Are you going to go 6 for 6 just like Kirby Smart did today?
I will hope to. I will tell you that I don't have an earpiece in, so I won't be able to hear the buzzer, but we'll do our best.
I'm sure Connor will make it as loud as possible. True or false? Kirby Smart has yet to sign the top player in Georgia off the 24/7 composite ratings during his time at Georgia.
Yeah, because Nolan Smith does not count as a Georgia player. I'm going to say that it's true that Kirby has not done that.
Let's let the audience jump in there.
Because Lawrence has been the number 1 player last year. Nolan will not be the number 1 player in Georgia this year. Is Trayvon Walker the number 1 player in Georgia right now? I'm going to say yes, Trayvon's the number 1 player in Georgia.
You going to say he is the number 1 player in Georgia?
Trayvon Walker's the number 1
so
player
the
in
answer
Georgia.
to your answer is?
Kirby has signed the number 1 player.
He has signed the number 1 player.
I don't know if that's true or false, but Kirby signed the number 1 player because Trayvon's the number 1 player in Georgia right now.
You think so?
I think so.
What about that stalwart receiver that went off to Oklahoma?
Surely Hazelwood's not ready to head of Trayvon Walker. That's one 24/7's going to live to regret.
That is correct, sir. You are correct that he is rated. You're wrong. The correct part is he's rated higher than Walker.
Oh, no.
Kirby has yet to sign the top player in Georgia.
So I talked myself into that one late. I'm sure other people got that one right.
It sounded like you decided to go for it on 4th down there, sir.
So, yeah, I did. You're right. 4th and 11. They're late in the game. So Walker's the number 5 player in the entire country. It's still not the number 5.
I think Hazelwood's the number 4 player in the country.
Well, good for him. Good for him.
It's a worthy choice. That's debatable.
I'm not mad. It's fine.
But look what Kirby's done. He's never once signed the number 1 player in Georgia.
Last number 1 composite player that Georgia got was 2015 with Trenton, I guess.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. In the state of Georgia. So 2016, we'll get into that maybe.
Almost had the number 1 guy last year because Fields was briefly that.
Yeah. He falls to number 2. The number 1 player in 2017, Georgia.
Hold on, Brandon Vernon says Walker's 22. In the 24/7 overall ranking, he's number 5, right?
24/7 Sports, the pure.
Yeah, he's 5. Okay, 22.
He's 5. 22 on the composite.
Excuse me, Brandon. Pardon me.
So let's roll. Brandon's currently 0 for 1. You lost that on.
I did.
You lost that on Kaiir Elam.
I did.
Like this one. 18 cycle went heavy on flips with 5 signees and a total of 11 prospects who were once committed to another school. How many flips were there in 2019?
This is a good question. This is a really good question.
How many flips does Georgia have in 2019? And we will have an update to this question.
Yeah, this is a really good question. So Pickens is obviously a flip that comes in here. I'm going to do terrible with remembering the rest of these. This is going to be embarrassing because I'm not going to remember these as well as I could.
All right, Mr. Burns, think about early signing day. There was a flip there, a very clear flip on the early signing period.
December was such a long time ago. Y'all help me out with this. I'm tired. It's been a long day. All right, help me out with this.
Okay, so he was once with Ohio State. And he flipped to Georgia.
Oh, yeah, Dwan Mathis. Sorry. Dwan.
So you got one Dwan. You got 2 Pickens.
Yeah.
Another one was committed to an SEC East rival from a junior college who flipped to the Bulldogs.
Oh, yeah, DJ Daniel committed to South Carolina. That's right.
That's 3.
Yeah, sorry. I'm telling you, I think I'm just tired. It's been a long day. I should have gotten that. We were on the air when Daniel picked South Carolina for 5 minutes. I was surprised. Normally when you're that surprised, those things have a tendency not to last very long. Georgia's had a couple of those over the last couple of years where you're like, well, where'd that come from? And then by the time you get to the end, everything works out the way it's supposed to.
Works out the way it's supposed to, huh? Number 3. Brennan, you're currently
I'm 0 for 3. I'm not doing well today.
You've lost to Jonathan Mingo and you've lost to Kaiir Elam.
I'm not doing well.
Jonathan Mingo. That's another subject for another show. That was not happening.
I'm the Florida State of pick sixes at the moment.
How many 2019 signees? How many 2019 signees were once committed to another school? Another update for this one.
Well, if they were committed to another school, wouldn't they be flips?
Well, flip is truly when
they were committed while they did that.
It's like the art of decommitting and flipping at the same time.
Yeah.
That's the flip. That's the technique on the flip. So we're talking about guys that were committed to another school. Remember, 2018 was gangbusters about that.
Yeah.
There were 11 guys that were committed to another school that Georgia ended up signing.
You're gonna have to help me out. I don't really remember. The ones I'm thinking about don't seem to be those kinds of guys. Davis wasn't. Marshall wasn't. The defensive linemen from Tennessee weren't. Were they?
So you're going to learn something here today, Brandon. Okay. There's a lot of them. Kenny McIntosh
was committed to where?
Committed to another school. Once committed to Miami.
Okay.
Tyreek Stevenson at one time was committed to where?
That's right. Yeah, I should have known that.
Where was he committed?
Was he committed to Miami?
No. Tyreek was to a school much more higher up on your venom scale.
Oh, was it Florida?
He was committed to Florida.
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
You want to keep going? We got the new one. We got Auburn. We got George Pickens.
Committed to Auburn. Yeah.
We got 5. We've got DJ Daniel.
Yeah.
Dwan Mathis.
Yeah.
The flips have to qualify as committed.
I forgot that Stevenson been committed to Florida. Well, I mean, listen, right there. I mean, I think George is very happy with the defensive back, a guy from the Gators. Then, and I told you before, I'm not going to badmouth Elam. I liked him as a player, and I wanted George to get him. But I think Georgia fans are very happy to have gotten Tyreek Stevenson.
Very happy. I would agree. And number 4 cornerback in the country versus number 6, whatever you want to slice it, Tyreek's a more explosive athlete, and he can play a lot of things for Georgia. Great matchup problem solver for the Bulldogs.
You're right.
Currently, Brandon.
I'm 0 for. I'm not doing well.
Are you going 0 for signing day like everybody thought?
Do I still have 2 chances left?
2 chances
left. I'm going to try to see if I can get these. I'm going to see if I can close out with 2 straight. Y'all help me out in the comments section.
Kind of like the Georgia signing day, right? Everybody thought you were going to go
right.
0 for.
Y'all help me out here.
Moving right along, number 4. This is a fun one.
All right.
Which 2019 recruit would Brandon say has the biggest potential post-football career in sports entertainment in the squared circle?
Best future pro wrestler on this roster?
So don't go for the easy one. Don't go for the natural one. Think deeper, Mr. Burns.
I'm going to say Bill Norton. Is that not the natural one?
That's your quick check down. But you got another option streaking downfield. He's cleared the safety.
A better pro wrestler than Norton. Now you got to understand that one of the things with pro wrestling is you got to be a stick man. You got to be able to work the microphone, cut the promos.
What about a incredibly healthy physique? What about movie star looks? Think about it now. He cuts a very imposing figure in a uniform.
You talking about Nakobe?
No.
Trayvon?
No, not Trayvon.
Jermaine Johnson?
Jermaine Johnson.
Okay.
Connor behind the glass. This is what I said. Jermaine Johnson. He'll quickly drift to Bill Norton, but if he doesn't come up with Johnson.
You predicted this?
Yes.
This is like, that's amazing.
But if he doesn't,
you predicted the answer that I would give.
But if he doesn't come up with Johnson, then he will have forgotten what the smell of a potential The Rock clone is.
Yeah, listen, Jermaine Johnson, he is very impressive in the physique category. I'm still satisfied with my first answer. I think Bill Norton talks about pro wrestling and stuff.
He does. That's why it made it so obvious. But I will say this. Jermaine Johnson, he's one of those guys you want going down a dark alley with. Mm-hmm. And he's also a guy that you don't want carrying your girl's books around the class.
I've already said I got Jermaine Johnson in the field early next season. I got him on the field early. Are we going to Connor Man behind the glass? Are we going to give Brandon credit for that? You got to give me credit for that. Now you got to give Jeff more credit because he actually went the next step and predicted the wrong answer that I would give. But I feel like I should be getting that one right. You got 2 more chances. You're 0 for 4. We're only on number 4. Oh wow! It just feels like the first half of the LSU game for you right now, doesn't it? Moving on to number 5. This is a good one, Brandon. I think you got this. All right. Kirby Smart and Georgia have never signed more than 2 prospects from the junior college ranks in any cycle until 2019. Good question. How many JUCO signees are in the 2019 class? So we've talked about 2 of them already, DJ and Jermaine. And there is also, what's wrong with me? I'm telling you, I'm just tired. I got DJ and Jermaine. Okay. And then I've got. Think defensive side of the ball, sir. Oh, Terrell Walthour. Okay. And somebody else? Is somebody else? Oh, yeah, Stetson Bennett. The mailman.
The mailman. With an assist from the man behind the glass.
I feel like under normal circumstances, I'd be getting all of these.
Is that because you've already done 6 hours of programming today?
Yeah, we've done a fair share of shows. Now, listen, I wouldn't rather be doing anything else, but it kind of takes my trivia brain and kind of puts that somewhere else.
You got one more, sir.
I'm gonna get this one.
You're gonna get this one. This is a pretty good one.
Oh no, I can't do this. I can't do this.
How many members of this signing class can crack the 4.5 mark in the 40-yard dash?
Okay.
Verified and/or laser times only.
I'm gonna say Tyreek. Neither of the two receivers. I don't believe Blaylock nor Pickens are 4.5 guys.
Pickens is actually a 4.7 guy, 4.75 guy. Not his game to be a burner.
I'm assuming Kobe Dean's gonna have to run a 4.5 at some point in time.
He doesn't run a 4.5. He's about 4.6. He's very fast though.
Y'all help me out. Give me some more. Don't just give me numbers. Give me names, y'all. Y'all give me names. I feel good about saying Stevenson. I would be unsure about Daniel. Although, actually, you got video of him running a 4.5 or running a fast 40. So I'm gonna put Daniel on there.
You remember that?
Yeah, I'm gonna put Daniel on there. You had that video at Dog Nation of him running that 40.
I'm sorry, sir. And YouTube. This is who's smarter here now. This is the Facebook YouTube challenge. There's an answer out there that there is another no one is thinking about.
Now, John Arena says Kenny McIntosh. I'm assuming that's not it.
No, Kenny McIntosh actually runs a 4.78.
Good for him. For a big guy like that, that's picking him up and putting him down.
One of my favorite Kenny McIntosh stories is when we talked about his 40. He says, man, I hadn't trained for that yet. I don't care. He said, I don't care I run a 4.8 40 at the opening. That doesn't make me a player or a bad player.
Oh, this is a good answer. LeBron Hudson says Nolan Smith. Does he run a 4.5?
He runs a 4.41.
No. What an athlete that big fella is.
That guy is the fastest recruit on the team.
What an athlete. That's pretty impressive.
I think Tyreek's 4.49. I think Nolan ran a 4.4 or Nolan actually ran a 4.51 at the opening at Texas. And then Tyreek ran a 4.49, but during the regionals, Nolan was faster. Nolan is a 4.5 guy.
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I wish I would have gotten it right. That's a good question. Good for y'all for getting that one.
As we start covering 2020, I think one of the impetus things for Georgia on the shopping list, much like Kroger for Valentine's Day, is they definitely have to add a little bit more blistering speed to the matrix of the program, I think.
That's an interesting take. You mean both sides of the ball, one side of the ball in particular?
No, dude, they got players. They got a lot of players.
That's an interesting take, though.
I'm talking about those pick them up and put them down guys. Now, listen, this is like saying my brand new Maybach or Ferrari Testarossa only gets 19 miles a gallon instead of 22.
Yeah.
It is one of those rich program problems, but I think you think about it, there's not a whole lot of blinders now. McColl's leaving.
I think it's an interesting take.
Not a whole lot of burners. A lot of burners. There's a handful, but not a lot of burners, especially at elite level. I don't think there's 15, 25 guys on. There's not enough to be a lethal program.
I think that's a really interesting thing to look for in the 2020 class and beyond. That's good stuff from Jeff Sintel. Now, here on Before the Hedges each and every week, we look to give away a $50 Kroger, as we like to call it. How about them groceries gift card? We do it with questions and comments. Get as many as we can here over the course of the next 5 minutes. Connor's done a good job of collecting some of these throughout the show, too, so we may call back on some of these older ones as well. Let's wrap up National Signing Day with a bang here. As many as we can over the course of the next couple of minutes. Let's pop in right now and get things going. Isaiah D's asking about Tommy Bush. What do you expect from Bush this upcoming season, Jeff?
Needs to make a move, much in the way that Matt Landers needed to progress a little bit for Georgia in 2018. He needs to make a move. I mean, he is really stinking fast. He's one of those 4-5 guys.
Justin Dinkin says, how did Dominic Blaylock lose his 5-star status after the great season he had, including the great All-Star season?
One of the greatest players in Georgia high school football history, especially a receiver, has a tremendous all-star circuit and showing. He just wasn't jazzy enough with the jazz hands. He was a dedicated recruit. There was no drama, and he fell. I think he still remained the number 5 receiver in the country, but lost the star.
Drew Roman says more touchdowns next season. Blaylock or Pickens? It's a good question. It's a really good question.
Both of them are getting in late. I think Blaylock will have more touchdowns because Pickens will draw more coverage.
Well, that's an interesting thing. Dapper Dan says, when do you think Cross announces that he's going to be a dog? That's a clever way of asking that, but it doesn't sound like you think that Nick Cross' postponement of his announcement is necessarily good news for UGA.
Like I said earlier, I don't think anything that young man does over the last 6 weeks of his recruitment will surprise me, and I don't think. Can you imagine if the Nick Cross watch goes as long as the defensive coordinator watch?
Yeah, that'd really be something. By the way, when do you think we hear something about that? This would be my question.
They would have been a good day to do that. National Signing Day guys are in the books.
They just didn't want to. I mean, Kirby just didn't flat out didn't want to. And he's on. Actually, I think he's on Feinbaum right now. He's on ESPN early. I don't even think they asked him about it. They should have though. That's why these national interviews sometimes are worthless. Zach Smith says, I'm still pumped about stealing Zion Logue out of Tennessee. All these other players are icing on the cake. Are you as high on Zion Logue as he is?
We wrote about, I think on the site today, we write so much stuff right now, but we wrote about Zion Logue, and I kind of pegged him as a guy that has advanced the most in his career over the last year of anybody Georgia signed. He got so much better and moved himself from mid-tier, 3-star player, maybe a Memphis, Middle Tennessee type guy at 6'6", 240 to 6'6", 285, 290. He became a terrific SEC prospect, and he did gain his 4th star as well. So I think everybody's going to go the sleeper guys to watch. I think Zion Logue could be the Jordan Davis of this class.
Xavier Mitchell said, how would you compare A.J. Green to George Pickens? Pickens, the guy that Georgia just got, a great 5-star in the past. A.J. Green, how would you compare these two?
Well, A.J. Green was always single-minded towards Georgia, no flip issues whatsoever. Played for a legendary high school head coach. Green's a little faster. A little bit more take the top off the defense guy than Pickens is. Pickens is just, a guy like, remember how good Mike Williams was in college football?
Good call.
Maybe a guy like that. Maybe a guy like, a higher ceiling Javon Wims. He's just going to kill people to death with those jump balls and those 50-50 balls, and also those, possession plays a little bit across the middle where he can just put his body on somebody.
This is a really good question from Charles Kaiser, who's obviously been paying very close attention. He says over under 15 signees for UGA in 2020. There's obviously a potential scholarship crunch there. Is it that dire in your mind?
It's definitely over. There's only 14 that are supposed to become available. I think another 4 or 5 will come available through merit of moving on to the NFL draft.
Yeah.
And then there's probably going to be some attrition. I'd see lots of people. This is a question I don't know if we don't get on the show enough. If Georgia's in a scholarship crunch, what are they doing besides showing really good faith to the punters they have, some of those inside linebackers that are not playing?
I made some people upset on Dog Nation the other day, and I didn't intend to. When it comes to Georgia's next place kicker beyond Rodrigo Blankenship, I'm sorry, I know this rubs some people the wrong way. I want that player to come on campus and earn his scholarship once he's on campus. I don't want to give out a scholarship to a place kicker sight unseen.
Not even an impact type kicker?
Just the definition of impact kicker seems to be a pretty fluid thing.
Will Reichard got the one that went to Alabama, that signed with Alabama. What about Jonathan Carty, the guy that just committed to Stanford?
It may be a mistake, but I liked Kirby's original philosophy on this of, we'll give a scholarship to a punter because that's obviously about field position. We'll make a place kicker earn it the way that Rodrigo Blankenship has. One of the great success stories in UGA history. That's what I would prefer this to be.
A few thoughts on that, though. You're trying to win a championship. Look how the Alabama program has struggled with kickers as well. What if you're a kicker away next year from another special run in 2020 when perhaps Fromm comes back from his senior season?
Oh, that's a very fair point. A couple of other quick ones. Chris Lader, I thought, asked a really good question. What are the chances that Georgia gets 2,000-yard backs next season and a 1,000-yard receiver? 2,000-yard backs and a 1,000-yard receiver.
I think they would be very high. That's not a triplets question. I know what you're talking about there. That's a nice little question because you think Coley's going to open it up a little bit more. You would think Holloman's going to be the guy. I think Georgia's going to play 15 games maybe next year, 14, 15 games, and then the 2,000-yard backs. Seems pretty simple with that line maturing that Swift would be one of the two.
If you don't mind, I want to give the $50 Kroger How About Them Groceries gift card to Chris for that question. I'll tell you why. In the college football playoff era, Jeff, no team has won the national championship without having at least one receiver who's gained more than 900 yards in the season. Georgia, for the most part, has not been close, not even a 1,000-yard, hasn't really been close to a 900-yard receiver. But in this era, that Justin Ross level player is just seemingly what you have to have. Georgia has not had it. I think if you're looking for Georgia breaking through, as you talked about earlier, winning the national championship next season, I think the wide receiver is, I know I've said this a lot, but I feel strongly about it. What Georgia does at the wide receiver position is a really important part of that discussion.
How many guys on the team that you think are legit threats to have a 1,000-yard season, though, at receiver? You got Holloman.
I would say Holloman is probably one. I would say that Pickens is one. In his first year, I don't know about Blaylock. I'd say he could get there eventually. And I'm not done with Demetrius Robertson yet, who had nearly 800 yards when he suited up for Cal in 2016. Different offense, different league. But if you're going to have this conversation, I do think you're going to include Robertson at least as a potential name in that.
Yeah, I think the other name to throw in there maybe is a Tyler Simmons, but also a D-Rob as well. Remember we were talking earlier about speed demons on the team? Not a lot of fast guys. Now, it seems like Georgia has more fast guys in the defensive backfield with guys like Campbell and other types like that than they do actually. Eric Stokes is one of the fastest guys on the team, no doubt. They don't have the burners, at least that take the top off guys. Like think about who are the natural candidates to be the kick returner next year? Who's the natural candidate to be the punt returner next year?
Yeah, I would say Kaiir has got to be one of those guys, but it's not. There's no obvious heir apparent necessarily, and that's one of those things that having just better overall speed would give you a chance to do. So the work of recruiting never ends, and that's a goal for Georgia to work on for its class of 2020. Jeff's got a lot more for you coming on the pages of DogNation.com in the days ahead. I'll see you tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for Dog Nation Daily Live. We'll have more of the reaction to the George Pickens news. We appreciate you being with us here, and we'll see you again next Wednesday, also this very same time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time, for Before the Hedges, presented by Kirby. You'll have a great day. We'll look forward to seeing you next week right here at the same time.